that you can see, it's the name of my thesis that I wrote. Here it is. The title is The History of Czech Immigration to Texas in the 19th Century, and that's the topic that I would like to tell you something about today. But of course, I don't have time to tell everything I have put there. So at the end of the presentation, there is going to be auction because I have just one piece of it. You know? No, just joking. Okay. So at the end of the presentation, I will show you where you can find it, and you can read it when you are at home. Because, like, you know, I am a very nice girl, and I will share it with everyone. Okay, so, yeah. So I just wanted to show you Prague. This is my town. Okay, you know it, right? Yes. Isn't it beautiful? Yes, yes it is. Yeah. Lights? Oh, yeah. Okay. It makes it even more beautiful. Yeah. What's this?
St. Charles Bridge.
Yeah, Charles Bridge. Good. All right. And I study in Brno. It's less beautiful, I know, but the atmosphere is also great there. I love the city where I study. And it's connected with what I wanted to tell you, how my Texas story began. So, fairy tales is about to begin. So 2 years ago, I arrived in Waco for 1 semester. It was like a study stay abroad that Masaryk University offers to Czech students. Yeah, yeah, you can see me. So I arrived in Waco, and quite frankly, I was very shocked. But that's another story. Maybe one day we will make another presentation about my cultural shock. But okay, I arrived and I didn't know about Czech communities here. This story is not very known in the Czech Republic, definitely not in Prague, because like people here are most from Moravia. Yes. And I was very impressed by Czech bakeries, kolaches, you know, by that the Czech that people can speak a little bit Czech. This is something what definitely my generation doesn't know. That when we travel, people usually don't know where the Czech Republic is. You know, like the typical question is it in Europe? I'm like, oh my God, yes, it's in Europe. So. And here, you know, everybody knows where the Czech Republic is. So I was really impressed. And yeah, so that was the first, first when I meet for the first time the Czech culture here. And I came back to the Czech Republic, and I was supposed to choose a topic for my thesis. And I didn't know what to choose, so I just said to myself, why not to write something about the Czech migration to Texas? And so my supervisor said, okay, that's a really good idea. So I went to some Czech libraries to find some books about Czech migration, and I couldn't find anything actually. So I said, okay, Alice, you know, you are really stupid. You should have done something when you were there. So I was, you know, trying to find some solution. And I found solution. I will come back to Texas, you know. So I came back last summer. That time I wasn't so shocked because I knew what to expect. So I spent 1 month last year, thanks to my dear friends John and Kathy Hillman. John is here today with us. So I could stay at their place for 1 month, and I did research. I was collecting all kinds of materials. I did interviews with Czech descendants. It was very interesting. I forgot to show you pictures. Yeah, This is me 2 years ago. That's the picture in front of McLennan Community College in Waco. I studied there for 1 semester. I studied there some English reading, something like that, Spanish. I forgot everything. But maybe one day I will restudy it. And I studied nutrition. Oh my God, that was so interesting, you know? Study nutrition in the United States of America. For example, I learned that ketchup is very healthy. Okay, thank you for that information. And this is the house where I lived with another Czech student. We were 2. The house was really cute. We had many friends there. Their name is, or we call them cockroaches. Yeah, they were very friendly. They came to say hi every morning to the kitchen. Yeah, that was really neat. This is me again, and that's another Czech student, Markéta. Now she is in Indiana. Oh, sorry. She is in Indiana now. She works in the United States of America. This is a Czech flag. Yeah, we put it in you know, to the wall of our house to show everyone that we are from the Czech Republic. Yeah, and this is just a picture of John, as I said, that is here today, and Kathy, that's his wife. And that the picture was taken at Baylor University, where I did the research last summer. Yeah. Okay, good. So, yeah. That was the fairy tale of my story, how my Texas story began. So as I said, last year I did the research. The result is here, in front of your eyes, my thesis. 90 pages, 70 pages of text, 29 pictures. That's the most important, or like, I mean the most interesting part of everyone. You know, when I show it to my friends, they don't read it. They just, the pictures are really nice. Yeah, and I also put there 2 interviews with Czech descendants. It might be interesting for you to read it, what I asked them and what they said to me. All right, so, and now I will just briefly tell you what the thesis is about, so that you know you will want to read it after. Okay, so at the beginning we have to realize that there are many questions regarding the Czech immigration. When, where, what, who, how, why, etc. So I will start with when. So in general, it was in the 19th century, of course. It started in the 19th century, but as it's written there, the mass character was after 1848, which is connected with the history. All right, so a little bit of history lesson now. In the 19th century, it wasn't Czech Republic, it wasn't either Czechoslovakia. We weren't free. The Czech lands were under the rule or oppression of the Austria-Hungary Empire. It wasn't fun at all. The official language was German, you know, and we weren't free. We couldn't do what we wanted. So the people, you know, started to leave their homelands because, like, what to do in the Austria-Hungary Empire? Okay, and yeah, as I put there, after 1848, because the administration procedure was easier. I will tell you about it later. If you look at the 19th century in general, the climax was 1890s, you know. Maybe you know it, your ancestors came around this year, you know, or like the end of the 19th century, something like that. But if you look at the Czech immigration in general to Texas, it would be the first decade of the 20th century, which is like in general the European immigration to America. Any idea why the first decade of the 20th century.
Because the draft going into World War One, or
Yes, that's a very good point. Yeah, because they wanted to avoid the war. You mean? Yeah. Yeah. I read something different. That America, they wanted or they needed someone who would work here, who would build the cities, the skyscrapers, and so on. So they actually offered the jobs that weren't many jobs in Europe. So many people left Europe at the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, good. So it was when. Now who? Do you think that rich people left the Czech lands? No. Why would rich people, leave their homelands? So we could say that poor people, or we can say mostly the peasants. But this is not as easy as it looks, because peasants were classified into 3 groups. At that time the society was divided. And yeah, I wrote sedláci in Czech, farmers, chalupníci, cottagers, because like cottage is chalup. We used to go to cottage almost every weekend. That's a Czech rarity. That comes from the communist period, because like we couldn't travel, so every family has a cottage or a weekend house, and we spent weekends there. Okay, but anyway, cottagers, chalupníci, and laborers, we call it in Czech nádeníci. And I have a question for you. Who enjoys the highest social status among these 3 groups? Who do you think? Farmers, cottagers, or laborers?
farmers.
Yes, definitely farmers. Because farmers actually gave the work to cottagers and to laborers. So yeah, 10 points, very good, farmers. And the cottagers and laborers lived in poverty, unfortunately. But cottagers, they were quite okay, but at least they owned a cottage or a house or a tiny land where they could farm. Yeah, laborers, they just worked. So, briefly, or if we can sum up it, if we ask who left the Czech lands, it was in majority the cottagers. Because the cottagers, they could sell the cottage, they could earn money, and they could buy the tickets to the boat and say goodbye, and they went to America. Yeah. Did you know that? No, you didn't. So you learned something new. That's good. Okay, yeah. This is the map. Okay, this is the Czech Republic, Slovakia. It used to be Czechoslovakia. That's what you probably know. Okay, good.
Would y'all rather just leave it off?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And I have 4 circles here. It's maybe not very visible, but I read in one book that there are actually 4 villages from which the very first people came. It's a Frenštát, you probably know, Vsetín, and then the 2 others that I just forgot. But I have it in my book, but Frenštát, Vsetín, and some 2 others.
Rožnov?
Yeah, I think Rožnov. Yeah, wait, never mind. I might find it. But Zadveřice, yeah, very good. Very good, thank you. So you know that, yeah. So these were the very first village that people, from which the people decided to live. People actually, they were going together, They didn't want to go just alone. So they left in a big groups, because Czech people like to be together. Okay, good. So, why? This is the most interesting question, I think. Why did Czech people leave, and why to Texas? They could leave to, I don't know, Sweden or Italy or Asia. No, they chose Texas. Good. Okay, so first of all, economical difficulties in Moravia. You know, Bohemia and Moravia, the two parts of the Czech lands, the economical situation was not even. You know, that it was really uneven. And people in Bohemia, they were quite okay. You know, like I am from Prague, I'm okay. But no, I'm just joking. So no, now it's not. Now it's all the same. But in the 19th century, it was really different. And you know, people in Moravia, they were mostly farmers. They you know, worked on some fields. So there weren't many jobs, as in Bohemia. Good. And this point is connected with the second point, which is really interesting. The Czech migration to Texas is connected with the end of domestic production of wool. So actually, it's connected with sheep. The plural is sheep. Yes, okay. It's English grammar. So, yeah. The Austria-Hungary Empire wasn't really nice to Czech people because they started to import the wool from their colonies. So they actually, you know, didn't need Czech people to make the wool. I've learned that the name of the people who make wool is weaver. Yeah, good. So suddenly the weavers lost their job. And they weren't qualified for anything else. Like, you know, today you just say, okay, so I will go, I don't know, do some other job. No. So they started to live really in poverty, you know, like they were desperate. So they said, okay, this is not for us, this country is not for us, so let's leave. So this is the point I'm sure you didn't know, that it's connected with sheep. Good. Very important point to mention, lack of freedom. Both, you know, political, religious freedom, or just freedom for living. You know, as I said, we were under the rule of Austria-Hungary Empire. So people wanted to live their lives, you know, they wanted to be free, they wanted to be happy. So they just say, okay, so we will just leave. And yeah, that's the point I already mentioned most of the time, Austria-Hungary operation. For example, men had to, you know, go or serve like for the military. You know, whenever there was some, I don't know, battle or conflict or war, they had to fight for the Austria-Hungary Empire. But they wanted to, you know, fight for the Czech people, or yeah. No, the situation wasn't really ideal at that time. Okay. And it's connected with something I already mentioned. The administration procedure got easier, you know. Of course, there were many illegal migration that we will never know how many people left in reality. Second point, the new railroad networks gave access to the North Sea, you know, in Germany. So it, you know, enabled people to leave, took a train, get to Germany, and take the boat and leave to America. Yeah, is that clear? Yeah, so they built new railroads, and so they could leave. This is interesting point. So, robota, you know, robota means actually work in Czech. I'm sure you know the word robot. Every language stole this word from us. You know, it's a Czech word, really, robot, and it's in every language. So, yeah, in 18th century, so century before the immigration, there was what we called robota, or like forced labor. You had to work for your lord when you were not king or something. But fortunately, it was abolished in 1775, but somehow it still survived, even in the 19th century. As I put there, you know, peasants were still obliged to work for their lords during designated days, especially during the planting and harvesting periods, without any remuneration. Okay, I checked this word how to pronounce it, but I already forgot. But you can read, that's fine.
Not money.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
So they were still, you know, in a quite it wasn't fair play. Let's face it. So even the robota was abolished, they still had to somehow, you know, work for the lords. So it contributed to the exodus. Like they weren't happy. And important point, last point, the Industrial Revolution. You know, because people power or human power was replaced by the machines. You know, because there were many new machines thanks to the development, industrial development. So people, as I said, lost jobs. So they had to leave. And also steamships, it's connected with another point. They became faster, safer, and bigger. So they could take more people to get there. Good, okay. And, important point, why Texas? So, as I put there, the opportunity of having large amounts of land. You know, for us today, it might be a little bit like, we don't really get this point, but for that people, it was very important. You know, they had really tiny land in the Czech lands. You know, they could have, I don't know, 10 potatoes there. But here, you know, they could afford a huge land. It was quite cheap, and they loved farming. It was actually the only thing they could do, you know. They, as I said, yeah, it was their life, you know, farming, planting. So for them, it was like dream, ideal vision. And as I said, yeah, the price of the land, I read in a book that it was around $5 to $10 per square acre in 1850s. Something, you know, incredible when we imagine, like, okay, so I will just buy land for $5, why not? And yeah, as I said, political and religious freedom, very important for people, and Texas, you know, could offer this. They could give this background, the political and religious freedom. Good. Okay. Do you know actually that Czech people who came to Texas, they wanted to be together with German people? Because, like, you know, the Czech, we always or often hear that Czech-German relationships are difficult or complicated. Well, not really in Texas. Czech people, they prefer to be with German because of the language, you know, because they understood better German than English. They came here and no one could speak English. I mean, like, Czech people. So they followed step by step where the Germans were already. I'm not saying they lived totally together. They didn't share everything, but they lived near to each other. Okay, yeah, so that was the language. And also the mentalities were similar. Do you remember as I was saying that I was shocked the first time I arrived here? Yeah, the cultural shock. Yeah, Texas mentality is a bit different from Czech mentality. And Czech mentality, it might be more similar to German. Yeah, so they prefer to be together or like kind of live together. The language, as I said, yeah, and I put that a clear example of peaceful coexistence within these two nations was Cat Spring. Yeah, it was one of the first town or community that was German and Czech as well. There were many Germans and Czech people. Good. Okay, so it was, where did the Czech people go? Clubs, organizations, something you know. Yeah, that's something I also write about in my thesis. Do you know this saying? where there are two Czechs, there are three clubs. Yeah, you know, we like getting together. Yeah, this is really typical for Czech people. Even when I was like child, I attended many clubs. I don't know, I played theater, I went to singing, and I'm sure Americans do this as well, but yeah, Czech people really loved it. And you know, when they were here, they wanted just moved the Czech lands to the Texas, you know, they wanted to rebuild everything. So they started to create the clubs and some organizations. As I put there, they were established in order to enable the Czechs to gather and provide either some sort of education or social help. You know, it's really hard for us to imagine, but they had to left everything behind. You know, they felt. I think they felt very lonely, or like they had to miss their homelands. So they wanted to be together with Czech people. They wanted to read Czech literature, cook Czech food, singing Czech songs. So that's the reason why they established many clubs, reading clubs. Yeah, I read many articles about reading clubs. I find it really interesting. But unfortunately, there was some library, and it burned because of a fire. So many Czech literature was lost. Yeah. Okay, and fraternal organizations that's connected with temple as well. So, for example, SPJST. That's actually, it stands for Slovanská podporující jednota státu Texas. In English, it's a Slavic Benevolent Order of the State of Texas. That's very known, I believe. Yeah, that's a big topic to talk about, so maybe some other time. Okay, and yeah, I just wanted to share with you that Czech people consequently assimilated, you know. Of course, you can't live in a country and you can't be 100% Czech forever, because you have children, you have grandchildren, and blah blah blah. So you know, throughout the years, of course, it started to be influenced by American way of life. So, for example, they started to run businesses. You know, of course, they still farmed, but maybe they discovered, okay, maybe we could, you know, run a business. You know, it's not a bad idea. We could maybe earn more money. So, for example, some blacksmith shops, butchery shops, Němeček, you know, Slováčeks, yeah. Bakery shops, the very famous Czech stop, or Village Bakery in West. Yeah, all, of course, there are more of them. I just put some of them for like example. Integration with the Americans, like marriages. You know, maybe at the beginning, Czech people preferred to marry other Czech people, but of course, throughout the times, they started to marry, you know, Czech women, married Americans. So the family started to be, it was a mix of the Czech and American culture, which is connected with declining of the Czech language, which I find really, really pity that people here can't really speak Czech. They might say some phrases, some sentences, some words, but they are not really able to keep the conversation, which is really pity, you know. So, but it's a natural process, you know, because you live in America, so of course you will speak English. Yeah, and in my book, I have the interview with one Czech descendant, and he actually shared with me a story that he has a daughter, and when she was going to school, you know, one of her teachers, she heard her, or she caught her speaking Czech, and she said, no, you will speak English, so she forbade her speaking Czech. So even at the schools, you know, it wasn't supported, which we can discuss if it's good or bad, because of course when you live in America, you should speak English. yeah, so I just wanted to show you that Czech people really, assimilated to the American background. And the last thing that I wanted to share with you, but I'm sure you know it, I call it Czech cultural imprint in Texas. So of course kolaches, that's one thing, but I have to tell you, sausage kolaches, that's not Czech. Please. Okay, you know it, perfect. That's, the typical example of that when you mix the culture. Yeah. So Czech bakeries in West, that's a typical imprint of Czech culture. Czech festivals, Westfest, or Polka Fest, Kolaches Fest, Pražská pouť in Praha. This I find a little bit bizarre. Czech's contest. I'm not really sure what's going on in this contest, but okay. Okay. It's supposed to be fun. The girls are wearing the kroj, the dress. But I don't know. I find it a little bit maybe too much. But that's America. They say that they want to keep the Czech heritage going. Continuing. So that's nice. I appreciate that. Yeah, which is connected with the next point, that people here like you, because you came today, so that's the example that you want to keep and maintain the Czech heritage. You want to, you don't want to forget it. It's important for you where your ancestors came from, and you want to share it with others, which makes me really happy. It's a bit moving. But yeah, that's really, I find it, as I say, I'm impressed. Okay, and do you know this? So this is for you, probably. I'm a Texas Czech, and I'm proud of it. Yeah. So, do you consider yourself like Texas Czech? Yeah, or would you say that you are Americans?
Both.
Both. Okay. Yeah. Or some one of you will say, no, I'm Czech, maybe. No, maybe not. You are like maybe 4th, 5th generation. Yeah, so it's really maybe.
Some of us are second.
Oh, okay, good. Good, that's perfect. It's not so far away. I mean, like to the history. Okay, good. Yes, so I think we came to the end. So I hope you survived my English. I was trying my best. Thank you very much for your attention.
Before anybody moves, let me take a picture. If you'll stand there.
Okay.
Let me take a picture.
So,
all of you.
am I supposed to stand or sit down?
Better sit down
Okay.
so I can see everybody.
And it's going to be a panorama, so I think this one, camera will do this. Well, it all works until you get in front of everybody. Okay. Let's see. Okay, ready? Everyone smile and be still. Give me so much. Let me get the iPad. It does it better. If you haven't been coming, we do this every first Tuesday of the month. It's Svačina Social Hour. And we were doing it 2nd and 4th, but a lot of people were having trouble getting here for both of them. So we've moved it to once a month, 2nd. And so that one, if you can